Good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's taken the time to join us today. My name is Moy Fung. I have the absolute privilege of hosting today's Ask a Professional, and I'm incredibly excited. I have Anthony Jones with us today, and I'll tell you a little bit more about him. But before we get started, for those of you who's here with us today, please do share the link because today's conversation is going to be transformational. I truly believe that. I was told that we have one of our best speakers today. That's what I was told, Anthony, okay, by your good friend, told me that this morning. So I believe her. I spoke with you yesterday. You sound like an incredible man. So I really look forward to having this conversation with you. So for those of you who are here with us today, please do share the link with your family, your friends, your brothers. Today, we're still talking about cultivating mental health and wellness in Black men. This is our conversation for the month of November as we continue the discussions for Movember. Movember is a movement where they raised funds for men's health and wellness, right? So Anthony Jones, without further ado, I do have your bio and I will go through it, right? I will go through it, but it is very high level. So I do want you to come to our virtual stages if you don't mind, so that I can introduce you and then you can share a little bit more about yourself.
Fair enough. Hello and good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. I know it's afternoon for some of us, I suppose. How are you doing, Anthony?
I'm doing well. It's a great day. The sun is shining in New Brunswick. It's a little bit after 1 hour time, and it's a bit cool this morning, but the sun is still shining, so that's good.
The sun
I'm
is
doing well,
shining.
thanks. Yeah.
That is awesome. That is awesome. So you are Chief Warrant Officer.
Yes, that is correct.
Chief Warrant Officer Anthony Jones. You were born in Jamaica, West Indies. You migrated to Canada in 1977. You enrolled in Army cadets at age 12.
Yes.
You joined the Army Reserves in 1986 as an infantry soldier while pursuing post-secondary education. After 12 years in the reserves, you transferred to the regular force in 1998, starting as a corporal. Your diverse career includes experiences such as deployments to Kosovo and Afghanistan, serving as platoon warrant officer with Task Force 110. Please correct me anywhere here if I'm not pronouncing stuff right.
You're good so far.
Where you suffered traumatic battlefield injury. Wow. Now, after recovery, you resumed duty as the regimental warrant officer for the Royal Canadian Regiment in 2011 and later served as the public duties. That was in 2012. Now, C.W. Jones, you are the recipient of the Member of Military Merit, and you'll explain a little bit more about what that all means, right? Now, you were also promoted to your current rank on June the 4th, 2021, and appointed as the Regimental Sergeant Major of the Infantry School on July 9th, 2021. You volunteer with the Caribbean community, you mentor young adults and contribute to community events. C.W. Jones is married to Master Warrant Officer Avril Baptiste Jones, also serving in, say that again?
Jean-Baptiste Jones, yeah.
Jean-Baptiste, okay.
Yeah,
Jean-Baptiste also serving in the Oh, okay, I see the connection now. Also serving in the Canadian Air Force as a human resources administrator. Canadian Army Force, sorry, yeah. As a human resources administrator. How interesting is that? How interesting is that? I'm so honored to have you. And I must say, Anthony, when I saw your picture and you were all suited up and all of that, I must say that I was a little bit intimidated. But then I got on the phone with you and you're like the sweetest thing, I must say.
Well,
right? So thank you so much for the time that you took to share with me about your early childhood, your experiences, and how you got into the Army. And I think that's the kind of conversation that we want to have today. We want to have a very candid conversation. We want to learn more about you being a soldier and how your experiences help to frame your mindset, your perspectives, but also how can the knowledge and wisdom that you've achieved over the years, how can that transfer to everyday civilian life? How do we cultivate mental health and wellness within Black men and the Black community. And that is our title today for those of you who are just starting or just joining us. Welcome once again. That is what we'll be discussing today as we continue these conversations in the month of November. So, Anthony, maybe you can just share a little bit about yourself. You told me an incredible story yesterday about the 12-year-old boy who got into trouble and the police officer, what he did to you. I'd love you to start with that if you don't mind.
Sure. It's funny. I said Fran big me up so much that I hope I live up to that expectation. So thank you very much for the invitation, first of all, and thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. But I came to Canada when I was 9.5, 10 years old, to a single mom who had 3 kids. I'm a boy, so I'm in the middle of 2 girls. So right away, I feel that I'm privileged, and I'm the only boy, so I'm special to my mom and to my sisters. But when I came to Canada, I fell into the wrong crowd. We were living in Montreal. Mom was doing her awesome best to give us a good life. I always thought we were rich, well-to-do kids because we wanted for nothing. She was good in giving good example, but she was a single mom. You know how the struggles go. But I got involved with the wrong crowd. And one day, a police officer who was a white French Canadian man picked me up, and he just looked at me and just told my life story. He said, "I can't believe you're out here hanging out with these guys." And he told me how bad they were, and a little bit older than me. And he said, "I can tell you your life. You're probably a son or a child of a single parent trying to do their best, came from the Caribbean, which I knew from." I told him. And he goes, "But here you are disrespecting your mother by doing things that are bad." And he told me, he said, "I volunteer with the cadet program, and I want you to be at the armory next Tuesday night, when that's where the cadets would meet. And if you're not there and I see you on the streets again, I'm going to take you to the following places." And then he drove me around Montreal. He drove me down to the waterfront, where he said, "This is where some of my colleagues will take Black boys and beat them with a phone book." And then he took me up back where the cells, and he goes, "And this is where they bring them back afterwards when they don't get bail because their parents can't afford it, because they think they're tough and whatever else. And this is where we put them until their court date. And you don't belong there. I think you have potential." So I went to the Army Cadets, and from there, the rest was history. But compounded with that, though, later on, when my grandparents came to Canada, because my mom sponsored them, they were very much involved in the church. And we were going to church every day, or every Sunday, rather. But then my mom got involved in the church, and then my life transformed when I saw my mom went from what we would call in the Caribbean community from an unsafe to a safe person. And then I realized God is real and faith is important. So, coupled with my military training and faith, I think that makes me a good soldier. I'm not going to say awesome, that's for others to decide. But I think it makes me a good soldier. It keeps me grounded. And then adding to that, when my first marriage didn't work, which I have no issues talking about because I got married in the church, I met someone in the military that we had obviously like-mindedness because we were both serving. And we met and realized that she was also a woman of faith, from the beautiful island of Dominica. And they say small island girls are probably the best. I'll call her lady now. And we got married, and also because she's a woman of faith, I think that just made the complete package, and that grounds me, and it makes me every day realize how important life is and how important people are around us. So that's me from the start, and I guess in a nutshell, to
And
start things
that's
off.
and that's a beautiful nutshell. That is such a beautiful nutshell. What a story of really inspiration and community and family. I truly love that. I mean, how many of you, I mean, the police officer, that's incredible. And I hope to have more of those police officers, right?
Yeah.
I think, and maybe from your point of view, Mr. Jones or Anthony, do you think we have officers like that now?
I do believe so. I have friends who serve in the police. Most of them are from the Caribbean, but I do believe so. I think in most cases, sometimes we don't give individuals an opportunity, and sometimes we like to, as a society in general, we like to um, paint everyone with the same brush. So I wear the uniform of the Canadian Armed Forces, and lately, and I'll talk about what I know. So the Canadian Armed Forces, lately we've been getting bad press about some senior officers, but that's not all of the Canadian Armed Forces. That is a very small percentage, and there are small percentages of bad police officers out there because we're human, we're fallible, and there's bad people everywhere. But I think for the most part, there are more good ones than bad ones. But good stories don't sell in the media, right? The bad stuff will always sell. The good stories are in our community, which we have to then communicate. Those are what we live every day. The good things happen around us, and it's for us to recognize those and use those as examples to make others better.
Awesome. Well, that's great. Thank you so much for that. And I mean, you touched on a few points in terms of, and that we'll get into later on in terms of how to cultivate mental health and wellness within the Black community. Just from your own life experiences, I see that there was a great cultivation that was taking place there, even though you might not have been aware of that. But I do want you to talk about your current position as an infantry soldier or trainer. If you can just speak a little bit about that, let us all know as well, for those of us who are not familiar with Army language, let us know, what is infantry training? What does that look like? And then we'll try to get into your experiences with that and how that can translate into mental health.
Right. So infantry training or the infantry trade are those individuals who will go do bad things to bad people on the behalf of their government. So if you look at any war movie, the infantry soldier are the ones that live in the trenches, that are going over the wall in those movies you see from World War II, and they're closing with and trying to kill the opponent. So the core business of the infantry, by definition, is to close with and destroy the enemy by day or by night, to hold and maintain ground in any condition. So that's what we do. And we train individuals that come to the infantry school in terms of leadership to do that. But it's not only that, we train them how to analyze situation, how to make decisions under tough conditions. You know, if you're living outside and it's snowing or cold or wet, you can still have your mind aware to make decisions that will impact other people so you can get after your plan. And that's infantry training in a nutshell. It is not for everyone. It is physically demanding. It is hard work. And, you know, one day, like what happened to me in 2010, you might have to put those training into practice. And I will say, from being in combat and being injured on the battlefield and surviving, because the troops around me did their part, and they were, you know, new in the military as well, in their first 3 years of a contract, the training does work. What we train to do on a daily basis, to analyze a situation, analyze a mission, come up with the right course of action, does work. And it ties to, again, resiliency and training, but it does work. And I love what I do. It is fun, it's rewarding, but it's all about people because we're leading people. Here at the infantry school, as a chief warrant officer, I am the senior advisor to the infantry school commandant on everything when it comes to training, discipline, drill, dress, and deportment. I'm his advisor on anything military law related. Anything that he decides on, he doesn't do it in silo. He will come and ask my opinion before he makes a decision. He's a final decision maker and the authority, but I'm his senior advisor.
Oh my God, how amazing. Can we just give him a virtual round of applause just for the incredible work that you're doing? I'm so excited. Anthony, I do want to know though, how has your infantry training provided, provided insights that is applicable to real life experiences? And that's particularly as it pertains to mental health challenges among
I
Black
think
men.
it just lets us realize that, you know, you're going to have bad days. There's no day that you're going to get up and things are going to go the way you plan it. You know, and I'll equate it to a patrol. We might plan when in Afghanistan to go on a patrol and we're just going out to talk to locals. But as you step out the door and you exit your vehicle, like what happened to me in 2010, someone might decide that no, it's not going to happen today, and they attack you. But now you have to be able to fight through that. And I think when we understand that resiliency is something that is learned, it's something that you learn daily. It's not a blueprint or one set of ideas or values. It's an ongoing process, and it's an ability to recover from an emotional, physical, spiritual, physical strength, you know, adversity, traumatic experience. It's the ability to recover from that, but not just recover and survive. You have to recover and thrive to bigger and better things. And all those are experiences that you can always fall back and say, you know what? Look where I was a year ago, but look what I'm doing now. It's not to always be stuck in the same place. And I think military training gives you that. It teaches that, you know, we in the military, we're big on goal setting. So we don't just have every soldier join day one and they're running the 13K in under a certain time. We build towards it. So there's goal setting required when you talk about resiliency. You have to visualize yourself doing something. And one of the things that we talk with our troops about when going to Afghanistan, we train on what we call a one-way range with live bullets. We'll shoot at targets, and we want to get your group into a certain um, centimeter or millimeter, but now I want you to visualize putting those same rounds in a human being because they're trying to kill you. So you have to visualize that, and that is hard on the mind. But the issue becomes when you actually have to do it, and you're going to go through the various emotions. You're going to either, when it happens, do you have to fight through it? Are you going to freeze or are you going to run away, right? And those are actual
Mm-hmm.
human emotions that you have to process. But I think training gets you through that, right?
So
A
training
three-point
is,
shooter, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
go ahead.
I was going to
So
say a
training is,
three-point shooter. I think there's a delay is there a delay? Because sometimes you freeze a bit. So I didn't want to cut you off when you're speaking. Sorry about that.
no, don't be sorry. Go ahead, Anthony. It's your time to talk. Go ahead.
I was gonna say it's like a basketball player, right? Not all basketball players are going to be good from day one at throwing at the free throw line when they get fouled, but they practice. They'll go in. A good basketball player will, if he knows that's his weakness or she, they will go into the gym early and they will practice that shot again and again and again. But they'll start visualizing that ball going to the net, and that's how they get over that because now they're not just accepting that okay, I make 3 out of 5. I want to make 5 out of 5 on every day regularly, and now I'm going to start getting 10 out of 10, and because they're now thriving and they're going past what we call the baseline of any training situation, right? And I think that's what we need to understand when it comes to resiliency.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that resiliency can ever be a bad thing? Having too much resiliency could ever be a bad thing?
It can be if we don't keep the human factor in everything you do. You got to remain humble, right? And when I was a young kid, I was a cadet, and my mother, when she got involved in the church, then I was battling because I was also in the church battling church and cadets, and I had to go to a parade, and he was also in a church function. And my grandmother said it's important for him to go to cadets. God is always going to be there, but cadets is one of those things that he will eventually age out. And my
Mm.
mom's okay, good point. So my mom came, and this is by no means a bragging, just an example. And there was awards being given out, and sometimes awards are a surprise. And of the 10 awards that were given, I think I got 6 or 7 of them. And my grandmother came back and said, "See," and she said, "See how well he did." And she said, "But remember, son, be humble." And she said, "It's very hard to be humble when you're good at something, but you got to remain humble." So resiliency, although it's there and it can train you, you can become so good. But if you look at, when the mighty falls, I think it's because they forget where they were coming from. They forget those experiences, and they become so. There's a fine line between confidence and cocky. And I tell
Yes.
every infant here, and I said, when there's a lot of our soldiers that are great at a lot of things, but I tell them don't get cocky. When you get cocky, that's when things will start falling off the rail. Remain humble.
You are dropping some nuggets. Thank you so much for that. Remain humble. I do want to ask though, because as I see you and I'm looking at you, and you have a smile. You speak with a smile. You have this pleasant presence, which I really love. Now, as a soldier, many soldiers come back from war. I mean, you've been injured in 2010, right? You've
Mm-hmm.
gone to war at least twice, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you still have this wonderful smile on your face. What strategies have you found to be helpful in maintaining your own personal well-being, mental health and well-being?
I think it's one of the few things that I always say. 3 things get me through every day, and I call them my 3 F's that I'm always thankful for. My family is a very big part of my life, so I'm close to my 2 sisters, and I think that is so important in our community and in life in general. You need to be close to your family because that is your family network. You can tell your family anything, and typically families don't judge. They will not. They will tell you the truth. Whereas sometimes my next F is your friends. I have really, really close friends that they keep me grounded and keep me honest and true. And the one thing I do is that whenever I do any public engagement, if any of my friends were listening or were involved, I will always go to them and say, "Hey, what could I have done better in that engagement, or what should I improve on?" Because that's
Mm-hmm.
important. I think those are some of the tools. And then the last one is faith. You have to believe in something, right? And sometimes we wrap faith to spirituality or religion, but it could be whatever you believe in. Because if you go by the definition of faith in the Bible, the evidence of things not seen and things hoped for, and I'm paraphrasing, it's something that is unknown, but you're believing anyway. So you have to believe that, today I'm going to get up and do amazing things. Some people call it self talk whatever you want to describe it as. But I think faith is important to get you over those obstacles daily.
Amazing. So you said family. What was number two? I think I
Friend,
missed number
friends,
two.
friends. So the three F's
Friend,
for me is, yeah, family, friends, faith.
family, friends, and faith. Now,
Yeah,
I'm going to
and they
take,
have, sorry,
go
and
ahead.
so they have to be good friends, right? So they can't just be, acquaintances. You know who your good bona fide friends are. And one of my closest friend, he's a Jamaican fella. He's the military as well. He's a recruiter in Toronto, and we met in military training. I was his boss in military training, and it was years, like 25 plus years ago now. But we've become so close because of again because of that understanding and the appreciation of family connection, that understand as well as that faith connection, but also the understanding because we're both in the military of service before self. Because join the military, you're given it's an act of service, and if you truly believe and think about what a soldier is, someday you might have to lay down your life for your country or for your friend, and that is the ultimate because that is service of itself. So I think those are important. And he's just a good friend that I'm just talking about any random. He's a good friend. If I call him at 3 in the morning and say, "Hey, meet me with a shovel and a flashlight," he'll never ask me what we're going to do. He'll just show up and he'll just say, the only question he might ask is, "What time should I meet you?" Right? Or where should I meet you? But he'll never ask, "What are we doing?" He'll never try to talk me and say, "Is it right?" Because he's supportive, right? But the idea is that it's just that they're dependable. And that's the idea I'm trying to get across. Obviously, if there's something wrong in the legal, he's going to say, "No, not a good idea," because he's a good friend. But it's that support that is given at any given time, right?
Certainly. And I hope we're all taking notes and how to be a good friend to someone, right? So when you've cultivated that friendship and that closeness with someone, sometimes it's not a matter of asking a whole bunch of questions. Like you said, your good friend, doesn't matter what time you would call him in the morning, he's saying, call me at any time in the morning. If you say show up with a shovel, he'll just do it and ask questions later. I think oftentimes we tend to ask too many questions. And I think that is a really great point at even cultivating mental health because we never know what someone might be going through. And sometimes it's not about too much questioning, but it's about being there and showing up when we ought to.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yes, yes. Now, I know you talked about your early life, which I was blown away by in the beginning because I'm a mother. I absolutely love being a mother. And you talked about your early life experiences and you talked about your mother also being your greatest role model. Would you say that that had an impact on you as well in terms of how you've been able to cultivate mental health and wellness in your own life?
I do believe so, and I think a lot of things is tied to our culture. I grew up in Jamaica with our grandparents, and when I was able to understand, I'm like, "Well, where's mom?" And they're like, "Oh, mom is in," we always say she's in foreign.
Lauren, yes.
Yeah, but I knew that every time I went to school every September, I didn't wear the same thing I wore the year before. We always had things, and to kids, things are important because they're going to start
Mm,
making association. So that's the first thing. Then when I came to Canada, just the fact that every time she was going somewhere to work or do whatever, because my older sister was only to look after us as we became cultured to the new society, she was always out working to give us a better life, right? And she always explains the things to us. She showed a lot of love, and I didn't have to go and say, "Well, some person that wasn't tangible to me is my role model," when I understood what a role model was. It was my mom because I saw her demonstrate faith, honesty, professionalism when she was going to work. I would see her iron her little. She wore a lab coat at the Jewish General Hospital because she was a dietary supervisor, and she would iron it every day. I mean, I learned to iron in cadets as well, but I saw that from my own mother. She would have a routine on a Saturday. We're cleaning the house and we're all taking part. Then we'll go for a walk and talk. And I think those values, and I think if we just perpetuate those within our
yes.
children, they will see it. One of the biggest examples my mom gave me when I started to work was she said, "Hey, son, you're the man of the house. You're not working. You have two sisters. When we were all finishing high school, post secondary," she says, "Honestly, it's going to be hard to putting three of you through post secondary." I said, "No, mom, I'll get a job." That's when I actually joined the reserves for myself through school. But then I had a little bit of, another side hustles, delivering the paper. I work in Montreal, Ilya, the stores are called dépanneurs, and you can actually do delivery with a little bicycle with a basket in front. That's a Montreal thing. I've never seen that anywhere else except in Europe. So I was a delivery guy at the stores, and I would make a little bit of money. And she one day said, "No, son, to show you how to save and budget, I think you need to contribute to one bill of the house. What bill do you want to contribute? So I'll contribute to the light bill. So I started giving her money at a young age. Well, fast forward years later when I decided to get married and move out, and I said, Mom, I'm gonna have to, put some extra hours in at work and school. So I might have to drop a class. And she was like, Don't drop classes. So I need to get first and last. She said, Well, it's okay. I said, What do you mean? She goes, I'll give it to you. So no, not want you to put you out. You're to provide for 3 kids. She goes, Son, the money you've been giving for years to pay that light bill, I was saving it for a day like today. Because
Mm-hmm.
I'm your mother, I've already budgeted to look after your kids when it comes to food in the fridge, paying for the rent, all that stuff. So what you're giving me was extra, but it's your money, and I put it away. So I use that same example as, hey, if someone is giving you something that you don't need, invest it back into them because it would pay dividends later on, right? And that's paying it forward. And that was a good life lesson that she taught me. But I try to, give the same example to my children.
That's incredible. Thank you so much. Now, for those of you who are just joining, this is Anthony Jones. He's the Chief Warrant Officer at the Canadian Armed Forces, and I'm just excited just to have him. I really am. We're talking about cultivating mental health and wellness within the Black men or the Black community. And please do, if you have questions for him, I think if there's anyone that knows how to cultivate mental health and wellness within Black men, it would be Anthony Jones. So please do write your questions in the chat. Feel free to put your virtual hands up. We want to hear from you as well. We certainly do want to hear from you. And you still have time. We have about a quarter of an hour, half hour, sorry, left. So please feel free just to share this link with your friends, your family, your Black men that you have in your life, your brothers, your cousins, your colleagues. Okay? I'm
Yeah,
just
hi.
checking. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Like my name is Pamela Boring. I just want to know, I know he mentioned that bad news sells. Now I want to know like why isn't there like more good news like talking about our people, especially like in the Black community. And we are not hearing that, like we're not seeing that on the news. And I think like it's good for like for our young Black men or young Black women to actually like hear good stories of people who are doing good things. Obviously we're not hearing like our people like doing good things, and like when they have achieved stuff, we're not seeing that, we're not hearing that. So I want to know like how can we see more of that and hear more of those good news.
Pam, thanks for the question. And I alluded to it earlier. That's one of the things we don't do well in any organization. If you think about the way the world is and social media, negative things sell. As human beings, for example, an example I'll give is how quickly is it sometimes with human beings we're quick to reward someone or put them in for recognition because they did outstanding work. Your employer give you, way back and they get a Christmas bonus at Christmas time, but nowadays with the media, it's always who's doing wrong because it's like a scandal. That's what people want because it's good for the adrenaline. So what I'm saying is that for us in the Black community, and I've always said, hey, ask me and I'm not going to be necessarily the guy to come and talk to any of the kids in the school in Toronto because I'm in New Brunswick. But if I'm ever in Toronto, I'll do it. But I can find 10, 20, 30 Black men that would come and talk about positiveness because positive things in our media don't sell papers and it's all about ratings and it's about money. But what I would say though, Pam, is that if we start doing it within our small circle, so for example, you go to a church and something good happens in the church and that is communicated, and then one person tell another person, well, that's why they come to your church now, because they heard about the goodness of that church or even a community, right? A basketball team is doing well. Someone say, hey, I play for this team down there. It's not really well known, but we have achieved this. Then people start coming. And that's for us to own. That's for us to do. One of the things I've noticed about Black men as well with resiliency, most Black men that are from Caribbean descent, from our culture, are not always easy for them to talk about their feelings. I grew up, my grandfather raised me, and he was a farmer, he was a strong man, and it broke me when I saw him got old and couldn't look after himself anymore. It crushed me because I always looked at him as a strong, strapping man that worked the farm, that, you never saw him. I never saw my grandfather cry until he was older. So, until I was told it's okay to cry, it's okay to show feelings. So within our Black men, even resiliency, if you want to, say have support groups and have a conversation, some of them don't want to talk about their feelings, but we can talk about positive things, but it's for us to share those positive things. There's a lot of positive things for us to share it, but you'll never get it from social media. You'll see, and I'll wrap it up with here. You'll see the positiveness about when they just announced a new Speaker of the House. He was a Black man. That was great news because why? It was the first Black man. But you'll hear nothing else about him unless he does something wrong. Because that was important because our media has different taglines, and it was important from a inclusive perspective to say, hey, look, someone of a visible minority achieved this high standard. But that's it. Until something negative happens, then you'll hear all the negativeness. And the last thing I'll say is, like, you look at the Canadian Armed Forces, we have done so much good things. We have troops currently deployed in Latvia, Poland, the UK, Iraq, doing outstanding work on behalf of the government of Canada, away from home for Christmas, helping other countries rebuild because they can't help themselves. But you don't hear that. What you hear is how many of these small, minute of officers in our military that have done something negative, because that sells papers and get viewers on TV. I hope I've answered your question, Pam.
That was good. Thank you. Thank you, Anthony. Francis wants, how important do you feel it is to give back to your community as a part of mental wellness?
I think it's very important. And one
It's
of the things
Francis.
that was from Fran. I think it's very important.
That's
because
correct.
we're the example, Fran. If I don't take what I've learned and cultivate it back into someone else in my community, then I'm doing an injustice to my community, because that's who. It's easy for someone to do something that they might find challenging when the person giving them that task or example to do looks like them, talks like them, have the same somewhat experience, as we would say in the Caribbean, brought up, say, like them, right? Because we have similarity. So I think it's very important. That's one of the things, as I'm getting ready to retire in a year and a half, I'm looking at my venue where I'm going to put my efforts, and it will be in the Black community. When I was in Toronto, that was very much important to me, and I'll continue to do that because we're their example.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You talked about some incredible initiatives that the Canadian Armed Forces has done. But from a generalized perspective, how do you think leaders and peers can create a more inclusive and supportive environment for mental health discussions? I mean, we see it's happening right here, right? BBPA, I always big you up just for the incredible work that you continue to do. But from your perspective, how can leaders and peers create a more inclusive and supportive environment for mental health discussions, and considering the unique experiences of Black men?
I think they should not be afraid of the conversation. I think it should be included in almost every aspect of what we do. I think, like, even our churches, and I always talk about things that I know, our churches, they believe in prayer, which is fine, and that's a great thing, believe in God, but they don't talk about the challenge that you might encounter at work, but you're part of the church community. So, like, churches should have a program where they talk about mental health and resiliency. Every organization, in my belief, every sports team, small business, if you have a company that's more than 5 people, you should have a mandate where you're going to talk about mental health issues, talk about resiliency. And there's lots of different apps and books that you can read that give you coping mechanisms and workshops you can do. Right before this, before we got online, I was at a working group with our military talking about why do we only put training about resiliency in our basic training? It should be in every other training, because when people start going through different training leadership, it needs to be there. So I would advocate that within our own community, we as business leaders, when I retire, whatever I'm doing, we need to include that in part of our daily activity routine, where it's so good to have a Christmas get together at Christmas time, right? Or we have a potluck every so often at work. Well, you can make that into an informative session, a lunch and learn. Bring your lunch and we'll talk about this sort of topic of discussion. It's sharing, right? But you create that safe space. When people walk in, they don't feel judged. And then, you have to have rules and so on. But I think it is it is possible and it should be done.
Certainly, thank you. And please feel free to, okay, I think you mentioned that men don't speak about their emotions. What tools and tips do you suggest to open up the dialogue at home?
I think at home, if for those who are married, is more open to your spouse, open to friends. When I say that friends are important, you have to find that comfort zone of folks that you want to talk to, and tell them that it's okay. There's a good friend of mine; he's Jamaican as well. I was the best man at his wedding, and now I'm not talking anyone's business, but now we're hanging out a lot more in New Brunswick because I'm living solo because I was in Ottawa, and so we hang out more. And I always say like, you don't say much. When he goes, we don't talk about our feelings. I'm like, but it's okay to talk about your feelings. So then, and he doesn't. So what I do is I start talk about my feelings, and then to provide that level of comfort that said, hey, I'm now being vulnerable to you, right? And now you can be vulnerable to me, right? And I think sometimes that's what it takes. So just say, hey, it's okay, and then you might find if there's issues, then you have some resources available to steer people towards.
That was a great point. Thank you. Someone has raised their hands. Feel free to open your mic and ask the question. That was an excellent point. Thank you for that.
Hi, Anthony. It's Stephanie. I just wanted to ask a follow-up to that question. I see the point to, as a man, opening up to other men, but what suggestions or tips would you give to us women to help men open up? As a mother, I have a husband who's of Jamaican descent. I'm raising sons who are emulating their fathers. So what would you suggest I do differently?
I say you have to find some commonality. One of the things I like to do is I like to go for walks. So sometimes, and I see my brother-in-law does it once. He said, one day I'm just sitting there and he goes, "Hey, I'm going up the street. I soon come back." I'm like, "What does that mean?" No, I thought he would have been bed saying, "Say, hey, babe, I'm going on the street for a walk. You want to come?" And I think for women, if include your spouse more and tell them that it's okay. So, like for example, I'm a very organized, predictable person to some degree. I'm a black and white. I like rules. I like law and order. So, for example, Christmas, I know what I'm going to buy for every person. I listen to conversations throughout the year, and I make a list. And I go Christmas Eve, and I buy. Then I go support charity, give them to the local people that are wrapping, pay them their wrap, and I leave. My wife can go shopping every day and sometimes not buy anything, but she walks the mall. And when she goes, hey, you want to come with me to the mall? I would never say no, because if I say no, no, I'm not discounting her. So I go and I would sit on a bench, or walk with her, carry the bags, carry the purse. And I think for women, just include them and then tell them that it's okay, right? So if you like something that you really, really like, say, hey, I'm going to do this. Would you like to join me? Include, even encourage sometimes I know the women like to have their women night out, right? Include the boys night out without judgment and say, hey, but there's still rules. If you tell them that you're going to the keg on Young Street, but the plan changed, I need to know that you're now going to the keg on York Street. And it's not that you're reporting, because when things happen, that's how you know not to worry. Or if something changed later on, you're not, you know what I mean? Because if I went to the keg on Young Street, that's what I say I'm going. But I went to the keg on York and didn't tell her, and all of a sudden there's an incident at the York Street keg. She's at home not worried because I'm supposed to be the keg at Young Street, right? When she gets a terrible call, then. So my point is that keep that open dialogue. And I think if we include our spouse in more things, I think that will start the conversation. And I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you.
Awesome. I heard you touched on being organized and predictable, Anthony. I was going to ask, just from a soldier perspective and infantry training and all that wonderful stuff. I mean, you love it, so it must be wonderful to you. Mm-hmm. In terms of discipline and routine, how has military training, how has that instilled discipline in a sense, like with the sense of discipline and routine, how does that help to establish, I guess you'd say, maintaining healthy habits and establishing wellness? That was so convoluted. Do you want me to say it again?
No, I think I get it. If we were talking like in terms of resiliency, self-care practice helps with the resiliency. And I think the military gives us that, because we know that when we get up in the morning, the first thing we're going to do is make our bed, We used to shave, and we took that away to give people more options to have beards. So we don't have to worry about shaving anymore. But I know I have to get up in the morning, make my bed. And if you're on a course, you have to be outside by 5:30 to ready to go on physical fitness training. Well, at the current rank that I am, I don't have to go and organize physical fitness training anymore. But it becomes so part of my routine that when I get up in the morning and do physical fitness training before I come to work, it makes me have a better day. I'm more aware of, you know what I mean? So when you have a set routine, and it's some sort of predictability because you know you've already planned out your day and you normally don't miss things. And if you do that, your body gets used to it and it makes you a better person. The minute you miss it, you might be grumpy. You know those folks that say, well, I didn't have my coffee, so I'm having a bad morning? Well, the coffee is part of the routine. I will get up, do my exercise in the morning, come down, put on the coffee, put it in, start my car because it's now cold, and I go on, and that's a routine. So I go through a process, and I think the military does provide that because it gives us that routine that helps us overcome those obstacles that we might have. And it's also a form of training, right? Because you'll always revert back to what you know, which is your training, right?
Awesome. So regardless of whether we're in the military or not, establishing a routine can
Yes.
certainly help us in maintaining stress and anxiety and well, not maintaining it, but better handling stress and anxiety.
That's right. I always say that if you and sometimes physical fitness is not for everyone, but it is important. But I say that if you don't gonna like I had a boss a couple of years ago, and he always said that if you can't find time in the morning to do physical fitness, then you have to exercise your mind by reading something. So if you get up in the morning and you don't have the opportunity to walk on the treadmill, or just pick up something and read for 5 minutes, something that you're curious about. Now you can use Google, but just read something for 5 minutes. That gives you a little bit more of awareness, and now you've exercised your mind. Or, there was times when I was deployed, and I was just sitting there, thinking about home. I was just writing my journal what I was feeling, what emotion I was having at that time, and just write in my journal. And when you come back and you look and you're like, oh, and then you realize, how did I overcome that? By writing, you realize, okay, this is what I was going through. And then you try to interpret that feeling, you know what I mean? So if you find a routine where you have a structured life where, things will happen to throw you off your structure, but I think that will give you coping mechanisms to say, hey, if not this, then what? So that's how I do it. And it works for me. So
yeah, no, I think that's incredible. And I'm seeing a correlation of some sort between being in the military and being trained and all that and counseling. So my whole aim in terms of, years from now, not years from now, but it's really just spending my time counseling. And with counseling or any kind of therapy, what we do is we prepare the individuals to really function on their own, right? Mm-hmm. And that's ultimately what you're saying, that these strategies, this training, it's helping individuals, helping the soldiers to be able to think on their feet, function on their own. And you talked about stuff pertaining to discipline, stress management. You even talked about effective communication, which is also a part of the military training, which is really great. Now, how about resourcefulness? How do you believe that your training helps, and what sort of skills would you say that can be established to help with like accessing on your own the mental health resources that you need, navigating the challenges, and just being able to apply certain skills to circumstance?
It's good to have a list of resources you can always tap into. I always say that, there's books you can read about resiliency. There's books you can read about mental toughness in the Black community. There's apps you can go find. But I think one of the ones that we use in the military that I like, and I think I've seen it's one of the practices on the civilian side, we call them the big four. And when we try to get our soldiers, officers through training, we tell them to do what we call goal setting. So you set a goal. So every day you get up, right? There's a reason why we make our beds in the morning. It's the first task you'll do for the day. And when you come home and you had a bad day, at least you've accomplished one thing for that day. You made your bed. And you can now lie in a nice bed, well made, and you're comfortable. So goal setting. The other one is visualization. When you visualize yourself, again, I was talking about that basketball reference, visualize yourself doing something over and over to get better at it, right? That's one of our top four. The other one is self-talk, where you self-motivate yourself. You're talking yourself through a problem. You're looking at different ways to cope, right? And the other one is what we call arousal control, and it more deals with when you're going through an anxious moment or anxiety or stressful moment. You control your breathing. Something happened that your body tenses up. Then if you start doing the proper breathing or try to figure out what made your body tense up and try and find a way to deal with it so that tension goes away and you're not in a hypervigilant situation. You know what I mean? So those are the things that we use. But there's other resources out there, um, for resiliency within the Black community. There are support groups. But again, some of our men don't like to talk their feeling, but support groups, I think, work well. Here at the school, we have little things that we call town halls, where different ranks will go into a room and talk to the boss, who's a decision maker. But before he comes in, I go in and set the tone, and I remind them that he's a decision maker. He has the authority to change things. So don't think of the rank that he's in front of you. He's still a man. Like, I'm a man, you're a man, and if there's women, you're a woman. So therefore, tell them what is affecting you, because he has the ability to change it. But if you don't tell him, he will never know, right? So there's support groups. There's wellness apps. We talked about the self-care with doing physical fitness as part of your routine. So there's many resources out there. We just have to tap into them.
Awesome. That is great. I'm just checking the chat to see if we have any other questions. Feel free to ask our dear Anthony Jones any questions. I'm having a wonderful time, sir. I am.
I'm glad. I always say that. I always say anything I do with one person walk away feeling a little bit better than when they came, then I've accomplished my aim. If just one person, then I've accomplished my aim.
Absolutely. We have a couple more minutes. I do want to talk about, because you're listing all these wonderful sort of these wonderful gems, really, just in terms of how we can cultivate mental health and wellness within our Black community. In life, generally speaking, in life, we're very reactive to circumstances. And based on my experiences, we're always going to have experiences. We're always going to have negative experiences that sometimes can really get the best of us. How important is it, do you think, that as it pertains to our mental health, that we are proactive as opposed to being reactive? Do you know what I mean? Like, you talked about having a list of resources, which is great. And I don't think people do that on an ordinary basis, and that's where that thought came in, is how important is it that we are proactive in maintaining our own. I mean, some of us, we go to the gym, right? We don't have any health issues, but we do go to the gym. We take supplements. We're doing all sorts of stuff to maintain, right? So that's being proactive. How can we do that from I guess, a mental health perspective?
I think from a mental health perspective, to be proactive is protect you. And I always say to my troops when they're having a difficult time, who's the most important person right now? Because they'll say, I'm doing this to my mom because I want to make them proud. Who's the most important person right now to you? And the answer should be me. And if Anthony Jones is good, then I'm going to exude that around everyone else and just be a good human. So to be proactive, prepare your mind. Don't let little things get into your psyche. I have always said to, and my wife always says, why are you so worried about that guy riding on your bumper? I said, babe, I'm worried about it because he doesn't see what's happening in front of me. And if the guy in front of me slam on his brake and I saw on my brake, we're going to get rear-ended. That's why I worry about it. So what do I do now? I could either keep stressed about it or I could do something about it. So my goal now is to change lane. So if we prepare ourselves and say, you know what, like, I get up in the morning, what am I going to do today? I have a little notebook on my nightstand. When something comes to me, I write it down. So when I get up in the morning, I say, what am I going to do today? And I have to purposely say, you know what, I'm not going to make anyone make me vex today, but sometimes that changes. So when they do something, I have to be mentally prepared to say, you know what, vexation today is not going to happen. No one's going to steal my joy, right? But in my position, it's hard for them to make me vex because, theoretically, I control their clock when they're here for training. We own the schedule. I can talk to them anytime I want. So, but I think it's important for us, though, is to, as you're talking about, don't be reactive, but to be, in terms of you, just human beings, sometimes we just get so fixated on the small things. I was reading a book a while ago, said, don't sweat the small things. And then the hashtag was, it's all small things. So if we just, have an attitude of and not an attitude of, I wouldn't say, just an attitude of just goodness, and say, you know what, those I'm not gonna let so and so get in my psyche because it's not worth it. And I think that's where the balance lies. But if it happens, what can I do about it? You have to always do something. Doing nothing when we're going through a difficult time is not the right answer. You have to do something.
You have to do something. I love that. I love that. And for myself, I think I'm going to stop right there. We can maybe take one more question from our audience members if there are questions. And oh, let me just take a look here. So I see. Ooh. So thank you, Mr. Jones. This is very informative and useful keynote. I would like to know which books you are currently reading or would recommend. You just mentioned one of them.
Yes, I'm reading a book called The 21 Habits of Leadership. That's one. But there's one that I looked at this morning, but I was trying to download on audiobooks, and it's called Grandmother's Hands. And he was talking about the body. And he was talking about, and it refers to how we as Black individuals, we are so subjected to, that it's a white world and we still have that slavery mentality. But if we train our body to do certain things, like be proactive, and they did talk about the breathing as well, they just refer to it differently. So I'm reading that book. There's another one called the Unapologetic, the Unapologetic Black Mental Health. I can't recall it, but anyway. But yes. So the book that I'm reading now is one on leadership, because I'm also big on leadership. It's called The 21 Habits of Leadership, and it's by a gentleman. His last name is Maxwell, and that's a good book if you're into leading people, leading small teams. And also, but the best book to anyone that could read, and a lot of people don't like to hear it, but it's true, it's the Bible. Because everything in life has a biblical reference.
I think that is an excellent.
Sorry, go ahead. No.
What?
Everything in life has a biblical reference.
Finish your thoughts.
Everything in life has a biblical reference. And I will say to people all the time, you don't have to be a Christian. It is a book. It is the word of God, but it also has references to it, right? Because even in the Old Testament, it says, who shall I send? Send me. Well, that's what we say as soldiers, and then we also say in the New Testament, I think it's in John, greater love has no man than this to lay down his life for his friend. Soldiers understand that. That's the ultimate sacrifice, right? So I think when we're looking for things to read, sometimes we don't know that it's right there, right? Because the one thing I've always say that all these books that are written by people, they're people like us, but they're the ones that took the act of faith or the time to pass on what they know, right? And then it's for us to pick it up and read it to get it into our soul, right? And not every book you're going to read is going to resonate with you, because the one that is called Grandmother's Hands, it tells actually up front, it tells you if you are, it asks you character questions. And it says, if you're this kind of person, this book is not for you, right? So up front, it asks you all these questions about who you are before you dive into the book.